And we're live for episode 173 of Trek Live. How you doing this morning, Dan?
I'm doing great. I'm excited to talk about some Star Trek this morning, especially Kelvin Timeline stuff. If my memory serves me correctly, it's been a while since we've talked about some Kelvin Timeline stuff, so it's nice to, as always, talk about Star Trek.
Yeah, it's definitely been a while since we touched on anything Kelvin Timeline. We did a Star Trek Beyond, uh, similar, like just kind of picked it to revisit it and watch it again and see what we thought.
Yeah.
Uh, Probably, it was definitely in 2020 sometime. I don't remember exactly when, but it's been a while,
Yeah, we're
especially
due.
in comparison to how much we talked about all the other stuff. We're definitely due. So, looking forward to talking about Star Trek Into Darkness, which is crazily 8 years old now. It feels like
Jeez.
not that long. Really crazy. Yeah. Uh, 8 years old in May. So, yeah, it's not new anymore, which is kind of an interesting way to look at it. I think
Yeah.
it was such a with these Kelvin Timeline movies because they came out unlike a lot of the other more recent Star Trek movies from the Next Generation stuff and even the later TOS movies. They always came out like while TV stuff was also running. So there was always like a lot going on. But with these Kelvin movies, with the TV stuff being completely dead and gone, when these movies hit, they were like nuclear bombs going off with all the attention and the amount of time that they were consuming like the bulk of the conversation. So it's been a while since Into Darkness kind of had its moment, and we both watched it this week over the last couple of days, and should be an interesting conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes.
So before we get into that, what about our rewatch recap? Uh, we haven't done that in a couple of weeks because
Yeah.
we did a fantasy draft that was pre-recorded, and then last week we did a rewatch recap for you, like the See It Skip It, DS9 season 5. So we didn't do a traditional where are we currently. So where are you currently?
So, if you guys remember correctly, Bill's right. I just finished season 5, so I'm into season 6 now of Deep Space Nine. So I've watched the first 4 episodes, those being A Time to Stand, Rocks and Charles, Sons and Daughters, Behind the Lines. Still a continuation of the Dominion War arc. Really in the thick of things right now. So I'm loving all these episodes. I can't really find a stinker in these 4 episodes. Even Sons and Daughters, I kind of really appreciate the exploration of just family, I guess, in it, and
Yeah.
and yeah, and that being said, I'm excited to keep going through this season just because sometimes I forget how good season 6 can be. I think it gets overshadowed with 4 and 5 maybe, but yeah, it's a great start to the season. Yeah, all really solid episodes. It's hard to kind of pick and highlight one. So, yeah.
Yeah, they're all really good. The first 6 or 7 episodes of season 6 are really serialized. They're kind of carrying the ball forward with a singular kind of storyline with the Dominion occupation of Deep Space Nine and
Yeah.
Cisco and crew, trying to retake it and trying to keep the war pointed in the right direction. It's a losing effort, and
Yeah.
so you get stuff. A lot of the recurring characters get a lot to do in these episodes. People like Dukat and Wayun
Yeah.
and even Garrick with being with the
The Defiant.
the Federation crew
Yeah.
on the Defiant
Yeah.
has a lot going on in episodes like Rocks and Shoals.
Mhm.
Damar is becoming a more prominent character at this point and stays so from here on out.
Yeah.
So it's a really fascinating point in Deep Space Nine. I think it is a stretch that people point to, and I think when you think of Deep Space Nine and you think of the war and serialization and all those qualities that are kind of unique to Deep Space Nine, this is kind of the point where that's peaked and is really Deep Space Nine really embracing those qualities. I
Mm-hmm.
I think it's interesting that you mentioned sons and daughters. That's definitely, I think, the outlier of the bunch because it is so much more quiet and, like you said, much more focused on like smaller issues, family stuff.
Yeah.
Working Alexander, Dukat, and Zial, and all the machinations that come with those complicated family dynamics. You know, complicated father-daughter, father-son relationships. Um, I love Rocks and Shoals. We were kind of talking last night off air, and I think there's really great. That's a really well balanced episode. I love the war stuff on the planet with the stranded batch of Jem'Hadar soldiers with running out of Ketracel White, and the Vorta who's wounded and makes a very cold-blooded and calculated decision at the end. But I equally love Kira's whole situation in that episode. I love the little motif of her, you know, the recurring image of her getting on the turbo lift, surrounded by Jem'Hadar and Cardassians, and starting to get used to it and having to fight against that, and that Bajoran Vedic kind of waking her up. It's really dark, grim stuff, but I think it's really well played and really urgent, and gives an Na'vi visitor some of her best stuff to do in a while. I think it's really great Kira character development and spotlighting that character really well.
But it's easy for it's interesting because they explore some of the characters kind of falling into just kind of being okay with it and normalizing the occupation.
Normalizing.
So, and then behind the lines is kind of the same thing with Odo. But that moment with the Vedic definitely snaps Kira out of that normalization and realizes what's happening. So, definitely a grim moment, but just interesting that they kind of explore that.
Yeah. Agreed. Yeah, you got some good stuff coming.
Yeah.
The rest of that arc and then the early part of season 6, I think, is really pretty consistently strong.
Yeah. What about you? How's your rewatch going?
It's going. I finished yesterday season 2 of Voyager and season 4 of Deep Space Nine. So another kind of year of Trek in the books. Season 4 of Deep Space Nine, just like you, I'm kind of a little bit behind you on the Deep Space Nine train, and you talked a lot about how strong Deep Space Nine season 4 is, and might be your favorite so far of the DS9 seasons at least, and it is unbelievably consistent. Even the ones that don't necessarily reach like classic status, I think are just there's so few misfires.
Yeah.
Like, even the ones that are just like, oh, they're pretty good are good.
Yeah.
There's really not that many that are real issues, and even the ones that I think are maybe a little less successful or interesting, I think, you know, I'm not as high on Sons of Moog and Bar Association and Body
But
Parts.
still,
like, there are some that I'm like, okay, but they're interesting, and they bring things to the table, and there's meat to chew on in those episodes, and they're you know, well-founded and serious fans of those episodes as well, that can articulate why those episodes do work for people. I think the only one that's bad, and I think the worst episode of both of those seasons, is the Muse. I think that's even worse than Threshold. I think it's awful. I think Threshold at least has some camp value, and I think, you know, goes off the rails at a certain point. But I think maybe the first act or two of it are kind of treading water and do a few interesting things, and Robert Duncan McNeil gets some wacky, crazy things to play. Where the Muse is just kind of, it just lays there for me. It just does not ever come to life at all.
Cyber Honey has a great question.
Yeah, Cyber Honey's asking me, why do you watch 2 series at a time and in order? Why not just do 1 series at a time? That's I think Dan has asked me that. Dan and I have at least talked about that many times.
Yes.
It kind of is the way I experienced it growing up. I like to watch them as they aired. And my experience as a teenager and a young kid was to watch every week for quite a few years of my life an episode of Deep Space Nine and an episode of Voyager as they came out. And I like to watch both of them kind of concurrently to kind of examine like where both shows were at those times, and to kind of put myself back into those childhood years and as well. So it's just one of my little quirks. I tend to watch it in like true air date order. It's definitely perfectly valid to say I'm watching Deep Space Nine, and burn through Deep Space Nine and then do Voyager. But I like watching. I did TNG the same way. I like watching the Maquis arc that kind of spans all three of those shows and kind of zigzag through. Like it gets introduced in Deep Space Nine, gets played up a little bit more in Deep Space Nine, and then it goes over to TNG for a couple of episodes, and then it obviously culminates in Voyager, and it continues on in Deep Space Nine. Like I like experiencing those kinds of things, rare as they may be, together and as a part of the timeline. So for the last quite a few years, when I rewatch Star Trek, like in any kind of like mission statement, I'm doing it kind of a way. That's usually how I do it. But no wrong way to do it.
I think it would be fascinating to do that with you someday, and I think what I would love to do is see who won the week, who has the best episode that week.
I kind of do that.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, because there are, for a lot of it, especially this year of Trek I just did with season 2 of Voyager, season 4 of Deep Space Nine. Many times it is you can look at the little air date order listings and look at the air dates, and you can see which ones aired together. And it is interesting to look at them and say, okay, yeah, like which one won the week.
Yeah.
Like for example, there was one that was it was the Thaw and the Muse were the two that were like paired together, and some people might say that's a really rough week because some people really don't like the Thaw, and a lot of people don't care for the Muse at all. So for some people that was a tough week in 1996.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think we're about the same age, Cyber Honey. I can echo some of that. Enterprise high school, early college years. The Enterprise ran in my 4 years of high school, 2004 to 2005. Started when I was a freshman, ended as I was a graduate, pretty much. So, part of my emotional connection to Enterprise is that. So yeah, it was really good. One of the things I definitely feel like I always noticed with season 2 of Voyager, just to kind of wrap this up with the rewatch recap. Season 2, we talked about the run at the beginning of season 2 being really kind of not a highlight for me. I think a lot of misfires in there, and not a lot of real standouts in that first 9 or 10 episodes of season 2 of Voyager. But I think it ends really well. I think it hits a point right around Meld, maybe. Like right around the midpoint after Threshold. So even right before Threshold, it gains some momentum for sure. I think it finds its footing and it finds some consistency, and there's far fewer missteps. There's some in there that I'm not as huge on. I don't love Innocent. Never been a huge Investigations fan. But in that run, you get Death Wish, you get Deadlock, you get Life Signs, which I really like. I love Meld, and I think that last run at the very end there with Tuvix, Resolutions, and Basics Part 1 is a pretty nice ending to a season.
Nice, and strong around there.
It is, and it's crazy how many little arcs. Season 2 of Voyager is more serialized than people give it credit for. I mean, with Resolutions, that's building on all the little slow burn character relationship moments with Janeway and Chakotay, and the merging of the Federation and Maquis crews, Starfleet and Maquis crews. Gets discussed there, and there's a lot of leaning into those things. In Basics, you get the real build up from the Kazon stuff through episodes like Maneuvers and Alliances, and the Suitor stuff goes back to Meld. Like there's just everything happening in Basics is leaning on things that happened through season 2 on pretty much every level. Every piece of that story is reliant on things that occurred in previous episodes. So, really enjoyed the back half of season 2 of Voyager, as I always do. I feel like the show's kind of finding its sea legs at this point.
Nice.
Yeah. All right. I think with that, stay tuned. I'm going to be posting probably in the next couple of days, as I always do, episode rankings for both those seasons. I like to put those two seasons together as well. I'll put that out too, with the full season 4 and season 2. Season 4 of DS9, season 2 of Voyager put together on the ranks as well. They kind of see which season kind of won out, maybe with what's a little more top heavy, what's a little more bottom heavy. So check that out on Twitter, probably later today. Be curious to hear people's feedback. But with that, I think we should go right into the topic at hand with Into Darkness. And um, I think my first question for you, before we even get into like the rewatch and how we felt about it now, this time around, was put yourself back, because you kind of fell in love with Star Trek through '09 and the Kelvin timeline. Like that was your kind of gateway into like really embracing it, right?
Yeah.
Without putting too many words in your mouth. Like it led to other things, but so try to put yourself back into 2013. How'd you feel about it when it came out? Did you have mixed emotions about it? Did you love it? Did you hate it? What was your initial reaction to it when it was new?
I had very high hopes, and so when I came out of the theater for watching it for the first time, I was, to be honest, a little bit disappointed. But I think that's because I had such high hopes. Because if you guys know me, that was my introduction into Star Trek. Right, I started with '09, went into the show, watched some of the shows, and then obviously Into Darkness came out, and I just remember being, I didn't know really how to feel, because I think I had just built it up so much in my head that it was just gonna be just as good, if not better, than '09, and there was some stuff that I really did like about it, and then some stuff that I didn't. So it was kind of a mixed emotions. Obviously happy that there was another movie coming out, but also there were some things that I was just like, and I was really early in my fandom, so I didn't really know how to kind of process that and explain it. But yeah, that's kind of my initial thoughts. Was just kind of no, disappointed might be a little bit too much, but yeah, just a little bit let down, actually, to be honest.
Let down. Okay. Yeah, for me, I loved it when it came out. I think I tend to love whatever's new, to be honest, to be fair. Like, sometimes I react very positively out of the gate, and then the time and revisiting and context kind of settles it into its kind of natural place, especially with the movies, I feel like.
Yeah.
But I remember being really excited about the prospect of this movie being, unlike '09, which I loved, what I wanted out of this was an adventure with the crew, like in their places, Kirk in the captain's chair, everybody getting to fulfill their roles and kind of getting a classic Star Trek adventure with the
what you
the
get.
crew. What you get, exactly. And that's what I feel like I responded well to. Like, that's what I wanted. That's what the movie kind of did. I wanted to see, because '09 is so about forming the crew and finding, through the process of that movie, everybody into their place, and then it ends with them off they go, with the promise of them as a crew out there exploring and all that stuff. So I wanted to see, to scratch that itch of like a new Star Trek episode or movie, and I feel like coming out of the theater on opening night, I got that. And the other thing I was always intrigued by the Kelvin timeline was I liked the idea of, with the parallel universe and the slightly alternate version of events, I was not opposed to exploring things that happened in the original series, but getting to do them in a different way. Like I was into that idea, and I still kind of am. I like the idea of being able to re-explore some of those old classic stories, but tell them in a different way, and allow events to unfold slightly differently with all these different variables in place.
Yeah.
So even the reintroduction of Khan and some of those things at the time, right out of the gate, I wasn't as bothered by. And even now, I'm a little bit more. I'm certainly more accepting of some of those choices than many people are. You won't find this movie on the bottom of my Star Trek movie ranks on the grounds that it did what it did with Khan and Wrath of Khan and Space Seed and all that stuff. Like that doesn't drive it down to the bottom for me. I'm not as in love with some of those choices now. I'm less forgiving of them now than maybe I was in 2013. But coming out of the gate, I was into it. I was a big fan of the movie.
Yeah, and kind of just to get into it, it does feel like TOS though. They're forced with the decision where Kirk has to weigh his options between the two, Doctor and obviously Spock. So there's elements that feel like TOS to me, and I can agree with you that it does feel like an adventure.
It does, and I also always felt like, and I still do, I think the way Kirk reacts to, his, Pike, the things that happen to kind of set the story into motion, that obsessive nature that he kind of finds himself in, and I think that's consistent with the Kirk that I know. I think there were things in the original series and episodes like
TOS
Arena
era
and an
Kirk,
Obsession,
yeah,
that he when he gets mad, when he feels
does
like
go off the rails a
he
little
has a
bit.
personal stake, he is not, he's not immune from kind of flying off the handle a little bit and taking it a little personally and needing to be pulled back in. And this Kirk is not as seasoned as William Shatner's Kirk in the Prime Universe and in the original series. This Captain Kirk was, and that's the other thing I was kind of pleased to see them do. One of the criticisms of '09 was that it force-fed young Kirk into the captain's chair a little too soon. Like that he's made captain too early in his career, and it doesn't really make sense. And this movie pays that bill a little bit. This movie is all about, I think the mission statement of this movie is really about making Kirk earn that seat and be put into positions where he has to make difficult decisions and understand what it means to be the captain of a ship, and it's also the captain of a crew, and taking care of his people and balancing the right and wrong of different situations and how to do these things. And he doesn't have the same journey that William Shatner's Kirk has in the original series, and I think this movie does a nice job of paying off those debts from '09 and making Kirk develop. So I on all that's everything Kirk related in this movie, I'm pretty on board with, and have been all along. I think that's what makes the movie work best for me. His reaction to things and the way he just responds and has to be pulled back and has to be challenged, and his whole journey is, I think, a really effective one here.
Yeah, he matures. I mean, you can see the parallels between the two crews, I guess, Khan's crew and Kirk's crew, and the importance of those two people.
Right.
So, yeah, I agree with that. I really do echo. There's some really good quiet moments with Kirk and Pike, especially in the bar. I do like those early scenes. Just some quiet moments that aren't when they're up against a lot of the action heavy stuff in this film. Just really make for some good stuff. When Kirk is talking to, he's got to come back to Scotty and says, "You may have been right about those." And there's some great interactions, just really quiet little moments like that. I think are just good on their own, but when you kind of butt them up with a lot of action, I think they become even better. So
I agree with you there. I think a lot of the quiet moments work really well. I love the Kirk scene with Pike in the bar, the way that echoes off of things that happened in '09.
Yeah, it's like a father
similar conversations that they've had. Yeah, exactly. I think that's really well played. I think Bruce Greenwood's really great as Pike in these movies.
So good in this.
He's really, really strong, and is I think every scene he's in both of these movies are really strong and effective, and I think his death here and the way that sets off Kirk is really well done. I think of like you just said, like the quiet moments that come off of that. I think Kirk. I think of like that image of Kirk like touching Spock's shoulder, getting up after Pike dies, like just little things like that are like little hints of like the friendship building, and that really works for me. After they've debated how to respond to going to get Harrison, who they think he is at that point, I'm thinking of the scene while they're in the shuttle and they meet Carol Marcus and they're going up to the Enterprise. Kirk's saying that he's gonna basically he's looking to kill him. Yeah, he's not interested in. He's following Marcus's orders, Admiral Marcus's orders, and Spock's kind of debating with him about it's not really what we do. We should try to take him and learn more and see what's up. And I love the moment on the bridge when he's in the captain's chair and he's addressing the crew on the PA system, and he pauses and he looks at Spock sitting at the science station, and he thinks about it, and he basically sides with Spock in that moment. Like, to me, that little moment where he's in the captain's chair and he looks at Spock at that station, just like the geography of it is like TOS. Like those kinds of things in the movie really work for me. I love those little moments. They feel at home. They feel homey Star Trek. They feel true to the characters. They feel consistent with, things that the characters that I know and love from the original series, with things that I could envision them doing in similar circumstances. The way that the scenes play out and the way that they interact with each other. It just, I really love those quiet moments that are sprinkled throughout this movie.
Yeah, for sure.
You mentioned Scotty, and Kirk like kind of admitting he was wrong, and Scotty might have been right. That's a huge thing in this movie. The way Scotty responds to this mission. He resigns over it.
The whole crew is kind of pushing back against.
Yeah.
Well, this is not. I thought we were explorers. We're not. We're not a military organization. It starts with Scotty, but it's that's good stuff.
Yeah, I think that's the other thing I like the way this movie's all about, and you got to think of it. I think it's maybe a few years late, but I guess putting yourself back in 2013, this movie's definitely all about trying to make comment on, not surrendering your values and your principles in the face of a threat, and coming off of 9/11 and things like that. Like, that was a constant self-check that I think the American people and the American government were kind of constantly being faced with in the wake of 9/11. And this movie puts Starfleet on its heels, and I think coming off of Star Trek 09 with the Narada destroying Vulcan and some of the shockwaves of that event, like this movie is exploring what happens when an organization like Starfleet is kind of losing sight of those values, and it's now matriculating into the crew, and different characters are responding differently to those decisions. And so Scotty's reached his breaking point. Yep. Good.
So you're saying it's like Let He Is Without Sin. A little bit.
Sort of. A little. I think it's much better done.
It's very. Yes, that's very true.
Yes. Yeah. I think they're exploring a lot of the same things. They're trying to explore the same sorts of
executed things. Way better.
And different driving forces behind why they're exploring them. I think this is clearly thinking about 9/11. Obviously, Let He Is Without Sin is, pre all that stuff.
Maybe Homefront and Paradise Lost are a little bit a better
similar as well.
Better episode to pair that with.
True. That is a good comparison, because I think that does explore a lot of the same themes very directly. But I think I like that it does that. I think that's a worthy thing to explore in Star Trek. The Starfleet ideal and the philosophy and the principles are such hallmarks of what Star Trek is, that these characters do the right thing when push comes to shove. Like, I think it's a good thing for especially a movie big movies should be bigger and a little bit more, put the characters in even more broad situations and swing a little more for the fences. And I think it's a good instinct to maybe find a way to, attack those things a little bit, make characters defend them, and find a way back to those values and principles. And I think this movie does those things reasonably well.
I think
through Scotty. I think Scotty's the sort of spokesperson for that. And like you said, the crew as a whole, I think, pushes back against some of these things at different points. But Scotty's certainly the most prominent voice.
The another aspect of this film that I do really love is Spock's fascination and exploration of death. And I think it's not really about that. It's about like him trying to wade through his emotions of how he feels about just the crew and everyone there. And I think it does start with the exploration of death and what it means to like cease to exist, but it's more about a reflection of what these people mean to Spock and what the relationships between Kirk and him, I think. So yeah, that's how it kind of kicks off with the mission with the volcano and
Yeah.
stuff like that. So that's kind of how it starts. But then when Pike's death, he kind of explores that as well and comes to the realization that he does care for it. And then there's some again great quiet moments when they go into Pike's office and they get dressed down and they kind of bicker a little bit. Those quiet moments too with Kirk and Spock, I think.
Yeah.
Building that relationship is cool to see as well. So, yeah.
Totally agree. I love the Kirk Spock relationship here. I think the building blocks toward the friendship that we would recognize are there. It has not arrived yet.
It's not refined yet. Yeah.
It's not refined yet. There are hints of it. There are moments where you can see it coming through.
Yeah.
But it's still a little rocky. They're not quite on the same page. But the respect is there. The admiration's there. And there are a lot of there are a lot of signs of what could be coming. And I think I also agree with you that I think the movie does a nice job of also paying the debt from '09 of how is Spock dealing with the fact that his planet is gone,
is gone,
that's a huge thing, and I think it would be irresponsible to not explore that. And to Beyond's credit, even Star Trek Beyond is kind of still dealing with that later on.
Yeah.
Spock has survivor's guilt, and how what does it mean to exist as a Vulcan, and what should Vulcans be doing at this point? Should Vulcans be on starships and out there and exploring space, or should they be rebuilding Vulcan society?
Yeah.
I love that these movies allow Spock's character to kind of explore those thoughts and force him to make decisions on those grounds.
Yeah.
So Cyber Honey's a fan of Into Darkness, has always loved it. Best criticism that she's heard is that it's a space adventure and not quite Trek, which she thinks is somewhat fair. It's a spoof of The Wrath of Khan, and no matter what, there will always be fanatics who will defend the original until they're blue in the face and oppose Into Darkness at all costs.
It's true.
When you tread on not just the original Star Trek as like a whole, but you hone in on
greatness,
probably the most beloved movie, and
you're gonna get that
the sort of hallmark that there's gonna be. It's a risky decision. Into Darkness introduced her to Benedict Cumberbatch. We haven't really talked about him yet, but it's coming. Many great moments. Favorite was when he was in the brig, and some of his dialogue with Spock. Can't even break a rule. How can you be expected to break bone? Yeah, the snobbishness that would lead to the final showdown between both characters. Yeah, Benedict Cumberbatch is a whole thing here, and the use of Khan. I think we've been on the record and talked about in just different conversations. I think throughout our history of doing Trek Live, I know we've talked about, without talking about Into Darkness specifically, this choice of kind of going down the Wrath of Khan and Spacey road, and bringing Khan back. What do you think? Do you think? Where do you stand? I mean, having rewatched it now, do you feel like it?
I think it was successful.
You think? Yeah. Okay.
And that might be contrary to what you think, Bill, but I think they do a decent job. Anytime you have an adversarial, we talk about it all the time. The guy isn't just bad to be bad. He's not mustache twirling, to use Bill's kind of saying that he always does. But I think he does a great job. I think the character is true to the Khan character in that, he is bad, but you can relate to him, the way that he just kind of cares about his crew. You may not agree with his kind of ideals, and they kind of touch out on the movie of what they're going to do if he gets his crew back and wakes them up and things like that. So you don't quite agree with something like that, but you can also agree with his kind of loyalty to his crew, which our main hero has just as much. And when you mirror those two, I do like that kind of commentary. But
Yeah.
If people want to complain, Khan was always the ultimate cheat. I think he's just as dangerous in a holding cell as he would be fighting a bunch of a whole squadron or whatever, however they put it in the movie. I think it's just that lethal. I think it's a fun kind of motif to. He's a product of a time and of the past, so I think that's fun to explore. Yeah, I don't know. I think it was successful. I think it's a bold move to kind of recast a very iconic character who, again, the actor crushed it in The Wrath of Khan, but in TOS. But yeah, I think Benedict Cumberbatch does a great job. I feel like he feels dangerous again, just in the holding cell talking and the way he delivers his lines and the way he yeah. So I don't have a problem with it, but
I think he's great. I mean, I think on just the sheer performance, like if you're just judging it as a performance, I think he does a great job. I think he's menacing, he's calculated, he's intellectually and physically equal to our crew, if not more, powerful. He's imposing adversary.
You just don't like that it's Khan.
I think it's just it was just an unnecessary dangerous decision because like Khan is such a complicated guy. Like Khan in Space Seed is a very different character than Khan in The Wrath of Khan. Like so you're just but the Khan that I think a lot of people have in their mind is Ricardo Montalban as Khan in The Wrath of Khan. But that character at that point in his life was coming off of however many 20 years on SETI Alpha 5, stranded, hellbent on revenge against Kirk. Like that's just a very different. He's a different person in that moment in that movie, and the things that are driving him are so radically different than what you're seeing drive him in Space Seed or Into Darkness. So, but because of his iconic status and the iconic status of that movie, and that it's the original series, and kind of what you just know people are afraid of doing with kind of rehashing things in the original series. I just think it was a lose-lose. I could not. The needle, the thread was just going to be too much to win over people in general. I think the way out of it, and I've long said this, would have been to have him not be Khan, have him be one of those guys, like have him be a one of the augments, and the threat is that he's going to wake Khan up, and we know what that means, and we know what that would bring, and that's
like, a good fix.
Khan is in the cryo.
That's a good fix.
He's in one of the torpedoes, like among the rest of them, like he's just one of them.
Yeah,
and that I think would have eased a lot of people's, because I think a lot of the qualities of the augments, like these genetically enhanced, out of time people who are programmed to want to rule and not serve, and feel like they are well equipped and well situated to sit at the top of the food chain. Like that's a cool idea that could work in new Trek.
I like that
these
fix.
Movies. Like that's something that can do it. So that allows you to play with that terrain and have Khan be there as sort of the just out of sight threat that we know about, that maybe the characters don't even quite connect with, but we as an audience know what it means if those photon torpedoes get opened up and these guys get out. Like what Khan's going to do,
but
and we're going to want to do.
I gotta play devil's advocate here. I gotta be the doctor
in
this situation. The masses, I think, it was for better or for worse, it was the Kelvin Timeline's job to kind of rekindle and to reintroduce some of these characters. So I get that kind of argument, and that fix I'm really down with. And like you said, I think one of the things that you liked about this film is that it was going to explore these iconic kind of fundamental, foundational building blocks that make the series, and kind of are very notorious in Star Trek. But I think that fits. I think you're right. It would be a good balance of introducing these characters to a very iconic kind of storyline, but not doing like a shot for shot remake, which we could argue a little bit later of what happens at the end. But
I think it would let people have their cake and eat it too. Like, I love the way that the way that the Khan character here puts a mirror up to Kirk. I think you said it. I know what I would do for my family. What would you do for yours? Mm-hmm. Like that whole motif and the way that is perfectly attuned to exploring Kirk's development, growing into the captaincy. Like that's the perfect way, I think, to, if you want to do that, if that's the mission statement of the movie, to have Kirk earn that chair and earn that position, that's a cool way to do it, and I think it works, and I think it gets you there. So I like that the movie has the tools in the arsenal to allow the character to do that. And this character, whether you want to call him John Erickson or John Harrison or Khan, regardless of the name and who he is and why he is, like, that, you could tweak it just a little bit to step on a few less toes, get a little bit away
John
from the
Harrison.
minefield.
Yeah.
Keep him John Harrison. You're calling him whatever you want. Yeah, John Harrison.
He's
is
an
fine.
Like,
but one of the guys who is in Space Seed, there are 74 of them, or however many, I forget the number.
72
of these,
at least in this film.
72.
Yeah.
And I think that's pulled directly out of Space Seed. So yeah, there's
72.
72 guys, men and women who are,
take your pick.
Frozen.
You can do 2. You can do 3.
It can be any of them, and it still kind of achieves the same thing, other than we got Khan, like bringing the Joker back and Batman. Like, it's like, it avoids that maybe little temptation to just do the cool thing, which I get. Like, that's what you're saying. Like, if the mission statement of the Kelvin timeline is to reintroduce these iconic characters to a whole new wave of fans, it does do that. It does allow for that. It opens the door for Khan. Who is Khan? Like, and then hopefully it leads somebody back to Space Seed and into Darkness and Wrath of Khan. Like, it does do those things, but I think it unnecessarily put them into a minefield that they weren't going to be able to.
And maybe they didn't realize
wade
that
through
at the time.
Safely.
They just wanted to try to move the needle with the name, but they didn't realize what they would unleash.
Yeah, I think, and then I think the other thing that happens is, like, there's 2 different triggers along the way in this movie. I think the first one is, of course, Khan saying, "My name is Khan." Like, that's the first, like, point that you're going to have, like, a crossroads. You're going to have people who are going to stick with it and are on board and, like, yeah, cool, it's Khan. And then you're going to have people who go, what the F, and they're going to bail and be kind of checked out. And then the next one after that is in the last 20 minutes of the movie, when they start the Wrath of Khan kind of direct referencing with, role reversing Kirk and Spock, and Spock yelling Khan after Kirk does what Spock did in the Wrath of Khan. Like, that is the other thing. And I feel like that's one too many major trigger points that are gonna divide people in my mind. I just, that's the one more so than the Khan thing. I could forgive the Khan thing, and I mostly do. I just wish that they would have made a few different decisions. And the shame of it is, I love those scenes. I love Kirk doing that. I think that's what Kirk had to do to earn the captaincy. I think, like, bringing him back to life and doing the silly stuff to retcon it and to immediately fix it stinks. And I wish there was a way to.
They do that in the Search for Spock, but no one's talking about that.
They do, but they take a whole movie to do it.
Yeah.
Like, they don't do it in a few minutes.
Yeah.
Like, that they have to. That whole next movie is about earning that. And like, there is I feel like there's at least a little bit more of a, as silly as that is too, and sci-fi, and this is Star Trek, we can do anything. Even when you're dead, you're not dead.
Yeah.
Like, that's all true, but at least with Search for Spock, the movie is the Search for Spock. It's a 90 minutes, 100 minutes of building to that. And Into Darkness, it's a 5 minutes. But the way those scenes are played, and the way those 2 actors connect, and that selling the friendship kind of sinking in, Spock realizing that Kirk is his friend in that moment, like, that all works for me. I love the way that scene plays, other than some of the direct dialogue references, and I think Spock yelling Khan at the end of it is the sort of the cardinal sin that they just
pushes it over the edge.
In my opinion, should not have done.
I think it falls right in line with Kirk's recklessness to go into there and then to. I mean, you could argue that that's TOS Kirk. Kirk, he cares about the ship and he doesn't want it to. I mean, it's plummeting to Earth. So I think that fits Kirk's kind of character to go in there and save the ship because TOS Kirk always is claimed to he's married to the ship and he would do anything for it. And I think here
that is true.
The Kelvin timeline would do anything for the ship, but I think even more so for his crew and for Spock. I think is kind of
and yes, but also he is constantly haunted by what his dad did. That is a huge driving force.
Yeah.
He knows what his dad did, and that is
that's true. When you think of that, that's just
right. What did his dad do? His dad went down with the ship and saved his crew, and saved his family.
Yeah,
his wife and just born son. Like that's what Dad did. So, of course, that's what he's gonna do. Like that's been haunting him his whole life. That's defined his existence in this series of events in the Kelvin timeline. So all of that is like I think it's well conceived. Like the steps to get the characters to where they need to get, I think make perfect sense for me. Like all of those decisions are on the merits, on point. I'm on board for a lot of them. My wishing for things to be different come in the details. It's Khan. It's that they take the steps to put the button on the nose of, we know we're doing Wrath of Khan. Like we know we're doing it.
Yeah.
We're not hiding from it. We're just gonna throw some dialogue in here to telegraph. Yeah, we know we're doing it. You know we're doing it. We're doing it. Like I wish they were a little more savvy and maybe more inventive in finding ways to do the things that I know that the movie wants to do and does, and I think does successfully without stepping on the toes and being so driven to recapture things that were done by the original crew.
Just get too cute with it.
I think they got too cute with it. That's just with 5 words said was like struggling to that's exactly what I think happened. The other thing that I know we've talked about and you kind of mentioned off air last night is like the action sequences. Like this is a movie
we're talking really about negatives here.
Would you still stand by that? Like that maybe it's a little too driven by the series of action sequences that kind of come at maybe like the 15-minute interval.
I think
what are your thoughts?
It kind of falls into the product of the time where at the time they're trying to compete with big summer blockbusters. So they did kind of force feed a lot of the action sequences where I think you could trim the fat here. I think there's some that just aren't needed. And maybe they are overly used. So that's where the kind of negatives, another negative for me is that it's too action heavy, I think. But Star Trek is definitely known for some action sequences. Obviously, that's totally fine. But it's
action adventure.
It's when you're trying to. It's like they brought the summer blockbuster recipe book and they just took things from that and put it in here. The stuff with Carol Marcus, I'll just briefly. That's one of those things too. When you're trying to insert something like that into and take that from a summer blockbuster kind of recipe. So those two things, I think, for me, really, that's another negative for me that brings this kind of movie down. It's don't get me wrong. There's some shot, and maybe we can kind of finish with that with this kind of discussion. But there's some action sequences and some shots that I absolutely love, and I think that are so cool. But there's others that I'm like, just is this moving the story along, or is this just for entertainment value? So.
Well, I'm kind of curious. Like, are there talk a little bit about that. Like, are there things, and you can get as into the weeds as you want. Like, are there shots? Are there like what are the shots and the scenes, like the action sequences that really works for you? Are there things that stand out in your mind as like that was really cool and it worked and it was effective? And are there things that you would point to and say, that might have been a little gratuitous and didn't? It feels a little like insert action sequence. Yeah.
Some stuff that I love is the Enterprise coming out of the sea. That's freaking cool. Mm-hmm. And then to mirror that at the end when it goes through the clouds, that just to me is like, I know at times it's there's some shots in here that are like, look what we can do. But those two shots I think are really cool. Another really cool, the Vengeance knocking the Enterprise out of warp. So cool. I think some of the problems at the end, some of the problem shots, I think are on Kronos. And then at the end when they're just when Spock is chasing Khan, I don't particularly care for it. I think that's just kind of a waste of time. And maybe a few other spots, but there's I want to kind of focus more on the positives here because I think there is some really cool imagery in this.
There is
this movie. So, do you have any that come to mind?
Yeah, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. I love the opening. I think the prologue, the pre-credit sequence is like a classic little Star Trek adventure that is both doing. It's both kind of giving you like a little episode kind of thing at the very beginning. Like you can tell they're out there and they're getting into these missions.
It's a mini away mission, yeah.
But it's also setting up the themes of the movie. I think it's beautifully setting up. You know, Kirk's not arrived yet at the like he's not totally formed yet as the captain. Spock is dealing with his crap coming out of the 09. You know, it's kind of walking both of those walks really well, and it's satisfying. And the shot of the ship coming out of the ocean, some people nitpick and go, well, how's the ship in the ocean, blah blah blah. Like some people get nitpicky, but I think it's awesome. I think it's a cool image. It's something we haven't ever seen before. Like in all these episodes and movies, you've seen the ship go through space in every different angle and through nebulas and crashing on planes. Like all these things you've seen the ship do. That's something you never saw the ship. And it was just cool and exciting to see something different and fresh. And you're totally right. The ship coming down through the clouds and then rising up through the clouds is a great shot. And I also think some of the stuff with Kronos and chasing him to in the Klingon, like that entire sequence, there's things in it that are good. I think but I think it goes on a little too long. I think the chase, the ship chase sequence with the little mud shuttle squeezing between the buildings. And
I love that little deep cut. yeah.
That's mud ship.
Yeah. When Sulu was like, cool. The mud incident a month ago. Yeah, that was just. I love that little carrot.
Yeah, I agree with that. I like that they referenced that. They're throwing little things in there that like things have happened. This crew has been out there doing things, and they've been on missions, and they've been together and had things. But those are some of the action sequences that. But that's one that stands out in my mind for sure, and the space jump from the Enterprise to the Vengeance with Kirk and Khan.
2 times as long as it needs to be.
I think it's a little long.
Yeah.
I think there are cool things in it, and I think the ending of it's neat. But yeah, like some of it just goes on a little long, and I'm more gravitating toward the quiet stuff in Into Darkness than the action stuff, if I'm being honest.
Because I'm not totally against all the stuff on Kronos. I think some of the stuff with the Klingons and you brought me here to speak Klingon, so I think that's cool.
Yeah, the horror stuff's awesome.
Yeah. I think there's some really funny moments in the shuttle with them two, Spock and her fighting.
Yes.
And Kirk saying, "No, don't drag me into this." Yeah, I do like that. Yeah. So I don't want to bag on the Kronos stuff too much because there are some really quiet moments that I really do enjoy in that whole time. But and that's such a Star Trek thing. Instead of fighting, let's kind of try to talk this through. And obviously, there's no
Definitely.
So
Another huge thing in this movie that I think kind of charts into even Discovery and stuff that's come later. This is another example of late Enterprise and into Discovery's kind of infatuation with Section 31. Like Section 31 has become a thing that is a frequent go-to, and I'll be like, it was for me, it was cool that they referenced like that at the time. I feel like it was cool. Now with hindsight and seeing what they've done, I do think the Section 31 thing is getting a little overcooked, and I'd prefer them to leave it alone.
At the time, though, I mean,
at the time, it was like a really deep cut. Like, wow, they're pulling Deep Space Nine and Enterprise stuff into this
20-year-old
like,
thing that we're pulling from.
Yeah, like that. I thought it was neat. But how do you feel about it now? Like, do you think like Admiral Marcus and his ties to?
Yeah, because we're about to get another show, and the stuff with Discovery.
Actually,
I think. Yeah. But I think they kept it vague enough in here that I think I don't have too much of a problem with it, because they didn't completely dive into it. It was just because. Yeah, again, it's one of those things where I think they're just trying to move the needle with some of the world stuff. So, yeah.
Yeah, it allows for Starfleet to... what it's become, I think, Section 31, is it's the way to put Starfleet, and the Federation, really, not Starfleet, the Federation into a... Like, it's the influence that can push the Federation into some darker territory. Like, it's an easy go-to to illustrate that we're kind of going astray, because Section 31 is the one that operates in the stray, like in the gray areas. So,
yeah, and maybe this is a bigger topic for maybe another day. But why does Section 31 always have to be into the darkness? And I know that they're the kind of wetworks guys where they got to do the dirty work and things like that. But why can't it be spun in a positive way instead of?
Well, I think.
I hope that's.
I had to guess.
Yeah, that's why I hope maybe
the show's gonna do.
Yeah, the show will
do
that, because I think anytime like I don't want it to be like a Reed type of like in the dark shadows and things like that. So
that's just been overdone. I mean, we've done that a lot. Like I think it's become a little one-dimensional, and I agree with you. I think hopefully if they're going to do a Section 31 show, that's a whole nother rabbit hole, though. Like, I think I still kind of think that the Section 31 label is like, I don't even know who the hell knows what that show even is going to be. But like now that Michelle Yeoh's character is who knows where, like she's not that tied to Section 31. It doesn't have to be a Section 31 show. If we're just following her. So it could very well still be, and that they could have named it that for a very intended reason. And that's what they're going to do. But if that's what they're going to do, that's what I hope they do with it. I hope that's what they do with the concept, just to add some three-dimensionality to their purpose and what they've done over the years.
Yeah.
Cyber Honey talked about now it's a good time. So she referenced that a common criticism for Into Darkness that she's heard is that it's a fun little space adventure, but maybe doesn't feel Star Trek enough. She says, yes, the story doesn't necessarily focus on the crew exploring the stars, but the moment Paramount created TNG, Trek evolved, it became more about maintaining your humanity during times of extreme crisis, and that's what Into Darkness does. So it is Trek because it started with TNG.
That's a great point.
Data and Worf, and even a little bit of Troy. You look at characters and how much they, even though they were alien, they're still striving to improve their humanity because that is what is important. Yeah, I mean, I think that is a good point, and I think one of the things Into Darkness got knocked around for a little bit was that it wasn't, like I kind of alluded to, one of the things I was really hungry for going into the movie was I wanted an adventure. Like I wanted an episode of Star Trek on the big screen with these characters. And we do get that, I think, in a lot of ways, but it's not them out in deep space exploring strange new worlds. It's very kind of homebound. They're dealing with Earth and the close-knit Federation stuff and not the deep space like Beyond does. I think Beyond is a much more like deep space adventure than Into Darkness, which is much more of a domestic kind of Federation daddy issues kind of a story. But I agree with you, Cyber Honey. I think Star Trek is as much about characters maintaining their humanity in crisis and, testing their values and principles as it is about, what's what's beyond that next star, as Captain Archer said in his little speech at the end of I think that's the mission statement of Star Trek. That speech, I think, pretty well puts it.
Yeah.
A couple other little things I would throw out there is I think Dr. McCoy is maybe a little underused here. I don't think he gets as much to do. I think other characters get more to do. I think Uhura has good things in this movie.
Scotty has good things.
Scotty has great things in this movie. But I do think Carl Urban's McCoy gets a little sidelined. He's got nice little scenes with Kirk here and there, and some. But I think he's sidelined into like one-liner kind of territory.
The comic
for
relief,
a good bit
almost.
of it.
Yeah,
he gets brought in to make a quip and say something Dr. McCoy here and there, but doesn't get a ton to do. And I wish that he was more active part, because I think Carl Urban's so good. But I think he gets much more to do, obviously, in Beyond. He's so much more active there. He gets his due there.
Mm-hmm.
Another one that I know we've talked about, Dr. Marcus, Carol Marcus, her character. I think Alice Eve is great, and I think her character is. I think it's a neat thing to bring her in, and because she's a pretty unexplored piece of important Kirk backstory and continuity, and in Star Trek II, if we're to believe that they had a child together, that means that there's a deep history there, and there's things that happened, and I like that this movie brings her in and tries to do things with that character. I wish there was a little bit more there with her development and things she gets to do, and I do the infamous scene of her undressing to get ready to go out on the away mission, I think is a little much, and maybe one of my least favorite. Yeah, little force fed. Anything else we're not thinking of?
I don't know. I think I just want to end with me saying, and Bill, I'll let you chime in on this, but I think Into Darkness gets unfairly judged and unfairly. It's very hard on it. People are very hard on it, and I don't think it gets a fair shake. I think when you kind of tread on the territory that it does, that warrants very stiff criticism, and I think it's sometimes unfairly judged. I think a little bit more positive on it, and we can get into letter grades if you want, but
sure.
Yeah, I think it's unfairly judged.
I would agree. I think it is beat up on a little bit too often. Like I kind of alluded to at the beginning, you're not going to see this 13th of 13 on my movie rankings. I just cannot see a scenario where I prefer The Final Frontier to this, where I prefer Nemesis to this, where I maybe even prefer Insurrection to this. There are things in it that I really love. I think they could have avoided some pitfalls with a few little tweaks, and I think they could have still achieved a lot of the things that this movie does best, without rattling as many cages and being as derivative as it ends up being. I think there were some avoidable mistakes, but it's certainly my least favorite of the three Kelvin movies. I think Beyond and 09 are far superior movies. I think they are more well balanced. I think they're more original. I think they're more exciting. I think the action sequences in both of those movies feel, for the most part, more urgent, and so I don't think you have as many moments where you kind of feel it dragging. I think this movie does sometimes feel its length. It's like 2 hours and 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And it feels a little long at times. But I do think it's a little underrated. It's such a polarizing topic, though. I think it's something I would like to listen to somebody, like I know Jim Morehouse from Trek Ranks loves Into Darkness, and I know our good friend Thad, who has been on Trek Live before, I think is one of the folks who puts it at the bottom of his list. So I would love to sit at a restaurant or a bar or on a podcast and listen to two people like that just talk about Into Darkness, and just hear the extreme like love it and real problems with it. Just kind of debate the issues.
Yeah.
Because I kind of find myself much more in the middle of those two things. It's not, I wouldn't say I love it. I like it. I enjoy it. But I also see some things that I wish were done differently.
Mm-hmm. If you were to give it a letter grade, what would you give it?
I think I'd go C plus.
Okay.
I think B minus or C plus. Like, and I'm that's not like. I think pre My Name is Khan, it's on its way to a B plus for me. Pre Spock yelling Khan and it going down that hole, it's probably on its way to a B or maybe even still a B plus. I don't know, but I think those missteps at the end are frustrating enough, and I think that the quick resolve to let's kill Kirk and let's bring him back just so quickly keeps it into that middle tier for me.
Okay.
What about you?
It's a B plus, or no, sorry, B minus. Sorry, not
B minus.
B minus. Okay. Yeah. For the reasons you just mentioned, and on top of the real very action heavy kind of structure to the whole thing. Yeah, I have less of an issue with the Khan stuff. It's more of the really shot for shot stuff at the end that I have the issue with, and then the action sequences. So,
you feel like this rewatch, because I kind of asked you at the
changed big
like,
time, big time.
Yeah,
change.
like what do you think like back in 2015, 2016, or 2017 when we started doing
Probably
this? If I would set put a letter grade on In Darkness.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
I think when you the thing that really swayed me is the really mature and development this Kelvin timeline Kirk kind of goes through. I think really, and then when you kind of mirror that with, how Kirk or how Khan sees his crew, and vice versa with the Khan thing, that's or Kirk thing. I just think that just bumps it up. Maybe almost a letter grade.
Wow. Okay.
So yeah, B minus for sure.
So we're right in the same territory. I'm kind of hovering in that C plus B minus territory. I think when I hit it in my rewatch and I watch it alongside of 09 and beyond, like watching them in sequence will be an interesting way to do it. I did not do that this time. I just watched Into Darkness as its own thing.
You are what you are around, so
it's true.
It might might flip it on its head a little bit. That might actually help it, or not. Maybe just because those are two movies are so good, or your preferences. I don't want to assume other people's preferences because you could absolutely love Into Darkness and absolutely hate Beyond. That's cool too, but
some people do. I've seen that. Cyber Honey's given it an A. She loves Into Darkness, and
nice.
I think that's awesome. I think that's great. Yeah. Cool. Well, I really enjoyed talking about Star Trek Into Darkness this morning. I'm glad I watched it this week. I think it was like I said, after 8 years and having it for quite a while now, not feel like the brand new thing. It was an interesting time to kind of look at it on its own and give it a chance as its own thing. And I'm glad we did it. I think timing was right, and I think we both got something out of it. Just the fact that you raised it by maybe a whole letter grade.
Yeah, is evidence that probably should do this more often.
Yeah, it's worth doing.
Yeah, find something that I wasn't too hot on to begin with, and see how it's kind of aged and changed. Which I guess is kind of like the rewatch stuff, but this was fun too.
Yeah, the movies are outliers though. The movies are kind of they operate a little differently, I think, and this was a good way to re-explore, I think.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, I think that'll do it.
Yeah.
Yep. Go ahead.
That is the discussion does not stop here. Twitter and Discord are probably the best ways to keep the discussion going. If you want to get a more in-depth kind of discussion about Star Trek and see where we're at with our rewatches. We definitely do that a lot on both of those. Discord is probably the best if you really want an up close and personal,
more personal discussion.
Yeah, definitely go over there. We will be back next week to talk about some things. I don't know if we want to reveal what we're kind of talking about next week.
Yeah, we'll save it.
Yeah, but definitely keep an eye on Twitter for all the updates and stuff like that. So, yeah, had a fun time talking about the Kelvin timeline. As always, look forward to kind of keeping the discussion alive on Twitter, on Discord, and next week.
Yep, Cyberhoney's suggesting a topic on yesterday's Enterprise and why I love it so much. And that could happen someday. You never know.
Ooh.
It is a favorite.
Yeah.
And I know you're not into it, Cyberhoney, so maybe that's a good reason to do it. So
yeah, I can sway
definitely keep that in mind. Thank you.
Yes. Thanks everybody for watching. We'll see you guys next week.
Take care, everybody.